If you asked a Hypixel Bridge player today what the rarest title in the history of the game was, most people today wouldn't be able to guess it. Maybe it's Metal Pipe with his The Bridge Divine 2 title. Sure, maybe there's an argument there, but eventually someone will earn the wins required for that title too. But what if I told you there's a title even rarer than that? A title so rare that you could only obtain it back in 2018, nearly 7 years ago now. Well, I can tell you there is, because I once held it. And this is the story of how I got it, why it mattered so much, and how I eventually lost it forever. But before we get to that, you kinda need to know the world Bridge was born into. So Bridge actually released back on March 28th, 2018 in the prototype lobby, Hypixel's testing ground for new games. Nobody knew if it would stick around or if it would vanish like half the other prototype games, but eventually Hypixel decided they were going to keep it. Unfortunately, not as its own standalone game. They ended up putting it in the duels lobby. So on October 24th, 2018, nearly 7 months after its creation, that's exactly where it landed. About a month before Bridge even joined duels though, Hypixel introduced something called duels seasons. Every 3 months, everyone's progress would reset and your skill was measured with a hidden rating system. But here's the twist. You could see your rank on the leaderboard, but never your exact rating. So let's say you're number 4 on the leaderboard. You're rating somewhere around 1672. You'd only know that you were number 4. You would have no idea about that 1672 rating that you had. You had no idea how far you were from ranking up or how close you were to dropping down. This made every single match feel like a gamble with invisible points. You had no idea if you were going to rank up or not. By the time Bridge became part of the duels lobby, it was tied to this system too now. There weren't any official rewards announced yet, but the thought that maybe Hypixel would give something special at the end of the season was enough to ignite a huge grind within players. Suddenly, this prototype game had transformed into one of the most competitive game modes on the server, with players chasing leaderboard spots like their lives depended on it. So at this point in Bridge, you could basically count the top players on one hand. The competition was fierce at the very top, but there was a really clear skill gap between the top 3 players and everyone else. That's not necessarily because these players were the best of all time. I'd say not at all actually. Bridge was just in such an underdeveloped state at this time. For example, the term hippoing had only been created a couple months prior at this point, and they were only now starting to become very commonly used. And here's a quick fun fact for y'all. The term hippoing actually originated from a player named Unloved Hippo. During a Bridge tournament, he built a massive wall protecting his base while playing against the tournament owner. The owner was so frustrated that he immediately made a rule in the server, quote unquote, no hippo walls. That's where the name came from. So you might be thinking, who were the top players back then? Well, in my opinion, the 3 main players were Apple Pies, Chaos Keepers, and me, Seismic. We were all neck and neck for number 1. The ranking would fluctuate constantly between us, but Apple Pies and I were at a slight disadvantage. Why? To understand that, you first need to know who Chaos Keepers was back then. Chaos Keepers was basically the closest thing the Bridge community had to a celebrity at the time. You might not be able to tell this right now from his 100 sub YouTube channel, but back then every player who wanted to be a top Bridge player knew who he was and would tune into his streams, because he was simply the best player that Hypixel Bridge had ever seen at the time, by far. Back when Bridge was still in the prototype lobby, there was no official win streak leaderboard. Players had to rely on forum posts to track records. Chaos Keepers had first grabbed his attention on July 20th, 2018, when he posted that he had a 420 Bridge win streak. And that streak kept climbing, eventually reaching a historic 1,020 win streak by July 25th. And he was the first ever player to hit a 1,000 win streak in the game, and this wouldn't be beaten for years to come. Then came a disaster. When Bridge moved from the prototype lobby to duels, all previous win streaks obtained in Bridge were stripped completely from you. Chaos Keepers lost the entire 1,020 win streak, a record that had defined him and brought him fame within the community. This completely killed his motivation, and for a moment, he was about to quit altogether. But then the new duels season for Bridge appeared. This was the last thing keeping him interested. By aiming for the #1 spot in the Bridge season, he could regain his publicity, he could earn respect, and reclaim a sense of purpose in the community. The only two players capable of beating him at the time were Apple Pies and I, but we couldn't do it consistently. Our playstyles at the time were so unorthodox that they made us unpredictable, and Chaos Keepers often struggled to figure out how to counter us. That unpredictability was the only edge we had in this, which is exactly why the #1 spot on the season leaderboard was so coveted and so difficult to claim. Now, over the next month or so, the grind just kept on going. Chaos Keepers now held the #1 spot pretty consistently, and I stayed at #2. Apple Pies eventually dropped out of the race, settling with his #3 spot. Everyone assumed this would be the final top 3 for the season, but then came New Year's Eve 2018, the last day of the season. Back then, beating lower ranked players would hardly give you any rating at all. None of the top players were queuing, because they were content to maintain their positions at this point. It was basically guaranteed that I wouldn't move up, unless I could beat a leaderboard player. That was the only way I had any chance to climb to #1. I didn't give up though. I queued all day long, hoping that somehow one match would push me past #2. Now, it's a little embarrassing to admit this now, but my goal back then was much different from Chaos Keepers. While his aim was to attract viewers, earn respect, and make a name for himself, I was just a really awkward kid back then, hoping that maybe this #1 title might be a conversation starter in the future to make new friends or something of that sort. That small, awkward goal of mine was enough to keep me going. And at this point, hours had passed with me grinding, with nothing changing. Then finally, I queued against this player, Quack, who at the time was around #9 on the leaderboard. I gave this match everything I had. More focus, more strategy, more determination, more everything than I had ever done before. And it worked. I won 5-0. The game ended, and then I saw it. My position on the leaderboard had jumped from #2 to #1. Where was Chaos Keepers during all of this? At a New Year's Eve party, congratulating me. One of the last times we would ever see him in the Minecraft community. And just like that, with only an hour or 2 left in the season, I had done it. I claimed the #1 bridge title in duels. I held on to this title with pride for the remainder of my bridge journey. For a few months after claiming it, I was widely recognized as one of the best bridge players who ever touched the game, before I slowly stepped back from being so competitive and I focused more so on grinding. This title brought me attention and respect, which was great, but how did I eventually lose it? Well, it's actually pretty boring. So my Minecraft's account was tied to my mother's email because at the time I got it, I was only like 10 or 11. I didn't have my own. That worked fine for years, until the Minecraft migrations were announced. I wasn't too concerned at the time. I'd already started backing away from Minecraft, and there wasn't any clear public explanation about what would happen if you didn't migrate. I almost completely quit around early 2022, so the game barely crossed my mind. By 2023, I started hearing warnings that accounts that hadn't been migrated would be deleted. This raised some concern of mine, but I didn't have reliable access to my mother's email. She was dealing with multiple surgeries and medical issues at this time, and I didn't want to bother her about some Minecraft account when I barely even play the game anymore. So yeah, I missed the migration period, and just like that, the account, along with the rarest title to ever hit the game, was gone forever. Nothing dramatic, nothing malicious, just missed migration.